Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mentorship Monday. Today, we've got an amazing individual on the line with us, Yolanda Mbanguzi, and she's going to be talking to us all about business process engineering. Now, Yolanda is both a YIEDI alumni. She's been through a program, so we've seen the growth of her business, but she's also a WOMEX technical expert. So Yolanda, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jayshree. Thank you so much for having me on the call today. And I'd also like to greet everyone on the call. Welcome to this amazing session of business process engineering, or rather demystifying, the myths about business process engineering. I'm very excited today to have everyone on the call to listen to me. And I'd really like to be very practical, about today's session and really have a chat, with everybody that's on the call. So I've got a slides to share, and I'd really like us to, engage, in the session, or rather maybe after the session, so that we've got enough time to share what business process engineering actually is. Um, So, Jayshree, if you'll allow me, so I just want to firstly, introduce myself. My name is Yolanda Mbanguzi, and I'm from a company called Zoe Projects and Consulting. And we do business process engineering, and using that as an opportunity to actually then, service companies and make sure or ensure that companies, whether it's small scale or large scale, have their processes documented. And then from then on, utilizing automation as a service technology for better efficiency and productivity. And these are some of the, companies that we have serviced. And basically the process, or the procedure rather, is the same, identifying processes for improvement. And then with that, being able to map these processes and provide this opportunity and make sure that companies actually have a defined or well set processes for them to be able to make better decisions, or rather have better processes in place for better productivity. And so today, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us then to our topic, demystifying business process engineering. So I would like us to, on the chat, and I would like Jayshree and Brandon to read this afterwards. What do we think business process engineering is, without thinking about the technical jargon or, the day-to-day work. But if you as a person or as an entrepreneur were to think about business process engineering in your head, what would that be like? So I'd like us to then take a moment at this point to think about this and, type it in the chat to be read later. And also, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to also now think about your business, so whether you are selling popcorn on the street, whether you are selling flowers, whether you are, providing project engineering services for other entities, what does your business actually do? So just have that in mind, or scribble it on a piece of paper. And also think about your strategic goals overall as an entity. What are your strategic goals, or where do you want to go? Probably let's think about, maybe let's make it a short-term goal in the next 3 months or 6 months. And then also let's think about what our daily operations are. So maybe you produce, chemicals, you produce a specific chemical, and think about what it takes to actually produce this chemical. What are the different steps that you would need to embark on to produce this specific chemical? From the time you go from the raw materials to those raw materials coming into your daily operations, from the, maybe if you have to mix, specific elements or specific chemicals together to make this chemical, And then from the time it needs to go out, to the customer or the end customer, let's think about those processes and, jot them down. In today's world, the key business challenges that we have are really the adaptation to evolving technology. So most of us small businesses struggle with this, where it's a fast-paced moving environment. And, with 5IR and all of that, we need to always keep up, with the evolving technology. Another issue that I've also noticed is the compilation, or rather complying with regulations and industry standards, can be very difficult as well. Efficiently managing manpower, equipment, materials, all of this is essential for productivity and for cost control, more especially for a small business. And then lastly, meeting client expectations for quality, timeliness, and budgets can be challenging. So basically, like, let's go back to that small chemical plant where you are producing a specific chemical, but you don't really know, you may know how to go about it, but don't necessarily have the proper processes or procedures to actually have that in place and to produce that chemical with the best, quality, timeliness, and complying with the main regulations for that standard. So today we're actually going to do, a bit of a case study to actually then help us as small businesses to ensure and to reach these specific milestones. So here on the slide, so imagine yourself as the customer. So you can put your name here as the customer, and then here, the solution that you are basically going to come up with or produce at the end of the session. So as a customer, so let's say you are customer A or customer maybe net florist, whatever products or service that you are providing. Let's think about our day-to-day issues or day-to-day processes, right? So most of the customer issues are that we do not have clearly defined processes. So you are producing this chemical, you are selling flowers, you are, maybe, producing or maybe defining or producing certain apps, or rather developing certain applications. You may know what the end product looks like, but not necessarily how what the process looks like to get to the end product. So most of us have this problem. We don't have clearly defined processes. Or in our processes, you find that there are mundane, repetitive tasks, maybe invoicing or swivel chairing between systems. So this is more predominantly on your medium to large enterprises, where they've got a lot of mundane tasks happening within processes. These are loan companies, banks, etc. And with that, you find that there's a lot of duplication and a lot of mundane, repetitive tasks. So the pains in this that are being identified are that because of these issues, most companies or entities are unable to analyze their data properly, because then this is time consuming and it creates inefficiency in the processes, right? And the gains and what we're trying to achieve with this is that we are trying to have a functional utility or a functional process. We're trying to obtain time efficiency. We're trying to obtain cost saving and also standardize processes. With this, if you will go with me to the slide on the left or the left side, the solution with that, once you have thought about, the problem that you're trying to solve in your organization, you will then be able to ascertain the efficient services being the process engineering standards, the operating procedures or standard operating procedures, and then for automation, this predominantly for your medium to large IT enterprises, this will apply a lot. And really, ladies and gentlemen, the pain relief in this is that we are trying to make sure that we are efficient, from A to Z in our processes, and ensure that there aren't any inefficiencies in the process, and to make sure that from going forward, our processes are efficient and we are actually able to then produce them at, the timeliest and most cost-effective manner. Right now, I'm going to take you through, a very simple case study done by done by Zoe Projects for a company called Bank Z Company. So just think about, any company that we can do this for. But in this case, we are talking about a Bank Z company where Bank Z struggled with inefficient task management and communication across departments, and this was their problem. They consulted Zoe Projects and Consulting to create a customer workflow solution, integrating automation and real-time collaboration features in order to deploy and launch their new loan product while maintaining effective communication across departments. The solution with that, so this was their problem statement. And as a result, so basically after, employing effective process engineering and process development, the result was that the project completion rates improved by 30%, while administrative overheads was reduced by 25%. Employers reported a higher engagement due to streamlined processes and better visibility into project statuses. The company now leverages business applications to continuously refine operations and ensure scalability and efficiency. So this is just one case study, ladies and gentlemen, that can also be used, as a benchmark to also help your business. I'll also take you through an example on how you as a company can also streamline, your process strategically. So like I said in the beginning, think about your strategic milestone, what is it that you actually want to achieve within the next 3 months, within the next week or within the next day. What does your company actually do, right? So think about that milestone. So again, using the business apps company as an example, or rather, you can think of the process analysis that takes place. And then from then on, the MVP development that will take place a few months after that. So think about this app that needs to be developed, right? Would first do the process analysis. And then from then on, develop the app itself. And then go to market, user test the product. And then from then on, it will be a continuous, development or a continuous refinement of this specific process. Another key factor or another key, strategy to employ is to actually have key performance indicators. So you as a small business, I know this might not look like it applies, but it actually does apply, You can have the minimum of 3 key performance indicators. In this case, as we are using the app development company or Bank Z, as an example, the KPI or the first KPI that can be used is that they then wanted this app developed by the 15th of January 2025. And the second KPI was that they wanted 1,000 new loan take-ups by the 30th of March 2025. And then the last one was just app features or continuous improvement on the different apps, or rather the specific product that they wanted launched. And then we can also employ a very basic operational plan. So as you see here, we've got all the KPIs listed here, and the base plan as to what actually the activity that needs to be developed, or rather performed on a daily basis. And it's also important, ladies and gentlemen, to have adequate resourcing for this specific operation or activity. And then the actual activity needs to be, clearly defined. So as a starting business, you don't have to have them, defined to the T, at first, but it's also good to have them outlined like this, just for you to give you an idea of how this holistically should look like. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we go into the operational tools for efficiency. So, think about that company that is, selling, or rather selling the specific chemical, or rather manufacturing the specific chemical, or, a retail store, a small mini market or retail store. So basically what we've discovered is that the most important, or rather tools that can be used for efficiency, are for project management. You could use Trello. So Trello has a free account that small businesses can use to actually effectively manage, or rather have a view of their daily projects. And then we also have Jira software. And then moving on to the actual process mapping or business process engineering. We've then got Visio. So this is the Visio sign. You can use Visio, and then Figma, and as well as UiPath to actually then, to actually develop your processes or design your processes. And then for collaboration, we've got these platforms such as Slack, Microsoft Teams, Google Drive. So these also come in handy, especially for small businesses, to be able to communicate across teams and effectively have their work done. And then I'm tempted to say lastly, but not really, ladies and gentlemen. So I've developed this basic, I can say, procedure or flow that you can implement in your business in order to be able to then say that you are actually process compliant. So the first step would actually for businesses, develop a basic process flow, or a step-by-step process on how your business actually operates, or whether it's a process or rather a product that you are producing, or, a retail store or a mini market that you have. We all have processes in our businesses, and these actually then determine how, your processes can be documented first off. So this will be the first step, the process flow. And then secondly, it's also important to look at the business requirements, more especially for the IT companies, or rather the software development companies. The business requirements will then be basically a detailed version of the process flow. Process flow will be high level, and then the business requirements will be very, very detailed, especially for the IT companies. For the non-IT companies, maybe manufacturing companies, chemical plants, etc., this business requirement is an equivalent to an SOP that I spoke about earlier, or standard operating procedure. So that can also be implemented, or rather developed. And then thirdly, we have, so basically just to show you, visually on how this process can look like, you can also adopt platforms such as Figma to design, so let's say you are designing that app for your customer. You can actually then have a prototype or a UI design on Figma to then be able to show your customer before it goes into development. Then lastly, the development takes place, and this development will be as a result of the first three steps, so it's kind of like a nice way to actually then be able to develop, the specific app. And this can be used, effectively, or as a quicker method to actually then ensure that there isn't, a lot of back and forth across teams. And then lastly, Zobot, or you can say automation. So for companies that, require this automation, more especially the small, the medium to large SMEs, SMME companies, this will then be, a pointer to actually then be able to utilize and use. But basically, this would be, a nice way, as a starting business, to actually think about your processes and be able to follow this procedure to then have them, effectively documented. So I want to leave you with this, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing, first and foremost, always identify your processes, what you actually do on a day-to-day basis to get to your end goal. Review your current process, or your current situation in the process. And then from then on, look for improvement in your current process. So let's say in your current process, you've got 10 steps, to actually perform a specific procedure, to develop that chemical, to, service that client. Think about how you can actually improve that and reduce it to only maybe 5 steps, and if it would take you 20 minutes to perform that specific task, think about ways to make it, a little shorter so that we are more effective. And then from then on, you will then implement your improvements. Thank you so much, Jayshree. I am done.
Thank you so much for that, Yolanda. I mean, that was a great overview. And the one thing I do want to stress before we open it up to questions, and I'd love to see what other individuals have said. And I think I'm going to preempt Raksha's question. So I'm actually going to hand over to Raksha. And let's hear your question, Raksha. You're welcome to unmute.
Thank you, Jayshree. Hi, Yolanda. Lovely to hear you speak here. It's a really interesting topic, and it's one that I've been waiting for because it's something that we all know. Well, I can only speak for myself, right? As a solopreneur in the world of providing services, not products. And often we feel a little bit excluded from this world of business process engineering, business process outsourcing. How do we make everything that you've spoken about relevant for a business like mine, that number one sells services, and number one that literally is a solopreneur? Because at the back of my mind, I have a sense that I'm not running as lean and potentially as efficiently as I could be. And are there aspects, and what would you advise is the starting point in terms of understanding? Because we don't know what we don't know. So yeah, to help us out from our perspective. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Raksha. So Raksha, I'll ask you this question and then I'll answer you. What does your business do? What do you actually do in your business, or what service do you provide?
So I provide consulting services for the development of SMEs, and that comes in various forms, whether that's working with an entrepreneur on their brand and marketing strategy, whether it's coaching them on the implementation of that, or whether it's consulting into various development programs where I run masterclasses or do coaching with the entrepreneurs to help them implement on some of these developmental areas in their businesses.
Okay, so what I can advise with that is think about your most baseline process, or think about your most baseline service, right? So you provide consulting services to SMMEs, and you said that it comes in different forms, right? I think one of them you said business development.
Yes, yeah.
So let's take that as a good example, or as a start, right? So as a consulting services for small or SMMEs for business development, so you then think about your day-to-day activity first, right? What do
Yes.
I do on a daily basis? What do I do on a daily basis? Do I identify these SMMEs maybe? And once I've identified these SMMEs, what kind of services do I then provide for them? And then you have everything jotted down or listed. And then from then on, once you have that, holistic view, I shared the baseline operational plan. Once you've got that, jotted down, with all the activities that need to take place, then it makes it easier once you have it visually to say, on a day-to-day basis, when I, Raksha, need to perform certain duties or certain tasks for this particular service or for this particular SMME, I need to do 1, 2, 3 in order to be able, to deliver the task. If you have it jotted down with the adequate resourcing or the adequate resourcing and, the adequate activities, then it makes it a little easier to then move on to other processes. So this applies, it's not rocket science. It actually applies to, I can say, to all industries, as long as we've got a baseline first, before going into detail, and then we can take it from there.
Thanks, Yolanda. And when you say the word baseline, let's expand on that, because there's a process for client acquisition. There's a process for client onboarding. There's a process for initiating the consulting work. Is it I'm developing a strategy for you? Is it that I'm developing a coaching solution to help you achieve this goal? Is it that I'm delivering a masterclass? So you will have different processes documented to deliver each of those products. And then from there, so I think my question is, help us to understand, like when you say baseline, explain that to me so that I know what's my starting point, please, Yolanda.
Okay, so your baseline, Raksha, would basically be, so we made an example of the process that you do, right? Providing consulting services, right? So the baseline, maybe I can share my screen again, if that's fine.
Absolutely, Yolanda. If it
Let
helps
me
to
go
answer the
back
question,
to,
go for it.
all right, thank you. So this is a baseline operational plan. Okay, maybe before here, we've actually got this strategic plan here, right? Firstly, thinking about the overall, what does the company do? So in your case, you provide strategic consulting services, right? For small SMME. So that's your overall, right? So think about your overall and say to yourself, okay, in the next 3 months, I want to reach maybe 20 SMMEs, right? And provide, your services for them or your consulting services, right? And then from then on, you'll then give yourself goals, right? Or key deliverables, rather, or key performance indicators to say that for me to reach my strategic plan, my overall strategic plan, I need to have the following in place. In this case, I've made an example here of the KPIs that you can have in place. Well, this was for a software development company, but for services, yes, you can also have, a similar plan to say that, okay, my first KPI will be for this with a specific timeline. And then also the number of, I can say SMMEs that you want to reach. And then, the last goal, which in this case was the continuous improvement. So this will look different for every company. There is no blueprint per se, but rather the process or the procedure is basically having that baseline, to think about your overall process. And then lastly, you can put it in this form where you've got the actual activities. So KPI1 has a specific activity. In this case, it was platform readiness, and then the actual resourcing, and then the activities, that were or that needed to be performed for that specific one. So for a service operating business, you can also have the same thing here, your baseline operational plan. I am providing consulting services or strategic consulting services for SMMEs. Maybe in this case, let's break it down. Let's say marketing or strategic marketing for SMMEs, right? What would be a typical KPI for that, Raksha? Or typical KPIs for that?
And
Maybe if you can give me an example.
me to measure that it's being effectively delivered for the client.
Okay.
I'm asking you that. The KPI is my measurable, right? So a typical KPI, the starting point of that would be the marketing strategy must be developed.
Okay, let's see if we can edit this. Oh, good.
Yolanda,
Okay.
can I make a
Yes.
suggestion? I think it's more of a generic question, as opposed to, just Raksha's specific example, because it's been asked by others in the group as well, in
Okay.
terms of how do we create, or what is it that has to be included in a base plan or a baseline in order
Okay.
to do your process engineering effectively. And, having been involved in the space, Yolanda, before, and, you and I have had these discussions as well, it's about mapping all of your key deliverables, what needs to be done, who needs to do that, what are the processes that go into doing it, and what is needed to deliver that. So it's almost like mapping out a journey of a specific task structure as opposed to, this is what I do as Raksha. But when you start thinking about the business development side of what you do, you map out all of your key performance indicators for that particular focus area. And then you start listing your resources and your activities for that particular deliverable. I think the challenge that a lot of us as small businesses face is because we are doing so many things, we want to try and engineer the processes for all of the things we do at the same time. You almost got to look at it as separate tasks that you
Yes,
then
separate
flesh out.
deliverables.
Is that in line, Yolanda, of my understanding of your topic as well?
Yes, absolutely. So this example here, so when I asked Raksha what she actually does, so it can apply, for example, all the businesses that are on the call can, put themselves, or rather use this baseline operational plan to then be able to develop their processes. So in this case, where we used marketing or the strategic marketing example, so here we would have the base plan. In this case, let's just say this was marketing, right? And then from then on, so you also need to identify the resources that are needed to actually perform that task. If it's yourself, then you put yourself there. And then from then on, the actual activities that will conjure efforts to make sure that that plan is done, or that KPI rather is done. And once the different businesses or the individuals have identified this, it sort of makes it easy every day when you go, into your business and you actually have something to look at, recognize, and be able to follow systematically every single day. I'm not sure if this, or if we can have another example maybe on the call, or if there are any other questions on the call regarding this. But the key factor, ladies and gents, just identify your key processes and be able to map them out in such manner. This is very high level. There's actually another process that takes it further down, or takes it a notch down. We call it, the different levels of process engineering, but this is good as a start.
Thanks so much, Yolanda. You can end your share, and I just would like you to direct your attention to the chat from a bit earlier, if you can go through that. And while you're doing that, Raksha, does that answer your question, or is there something else that you'd like to add to the conversation on that particular question?
All good for now. Thank you so much.
Okay. Now, Yolanda, while you're looking through the chat, very often, and I know you use this example as well, which is interesting. You use the financial services as an example. You used a technology client as an example. And Raksha asks a question very specifically, around service businesses. Now, how can small businesses, apply some of these concepts around business process engineering, especially when they don't have formal systems or departments? So when you're a solopreneur, you might think you have to be a technology business to apply some of these learnings. I know you don't have to, because we apply these learnings and we are a development company. But, often people think I need a team, I need systems, I need departments in order to get my business process engineering right, or just apply business processes. So how can they do it?
Okay. Thank you so much for the question, Jayshree. So for small businesses, very simple. Again, back to my example. think about what it is that the company actually does, on a day-to-day basis, right? Let's say you are producing, let me see, conventional example. Let's say you are making beverages, in your garage. You are making beverages in your garage, and these beverages are being used, or rather being taken to an end customer that will be, the people that come to procure or to buy from you, right? So the first thing, think about that process. What does it actually take me to actually produce this beverage, right? And from then on, you'll just map it down, map it down. Step one, for me to produce this beverage, I need to, maybe procure the ingredients, Step two, I need to get home, then perform a mixture of these certain ingredients, Step three, maybe I need to then package it, put it in the bottles. Step four, I need to then be able to, store them somewhere, even if it's in, your garage or somewhere in your house, that's still okay. The important thing, Jayshree and, the rest of the, everyone on the call here is basically just to understand simple process engineering or simple process thinking, which is what are my daily goals or what are my daily targets? Those daily targets obviously then, translate into monthly targets and more strategic long-term goals. Once you think about that and, map everything down as is, as a reminder on a daily basis, you will then be able to then follow that procedure, and be able to, have better record, firstly, of the activities, have visibility of the activities, and then also use that manual to train. So let's say you have, a new person coming in to work with you. You don't have to do that yourself to actually take them through the whole process of producing the specific beverage. But if you've got these systems in place, or if you've got this process jotted down, it can be on a simple Word document or in a simple Excel document, then the work is it becomes very easy from then. So actually, I believe that every company, small or large, can employ process engineering.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. I would like to open up the floor for any other questions from our participants on the line today. As always, please put your hands up and then we'll direct the questions to you as they come along. So let me just see. There aren't any questions yet, Yolanda. I know by now you've also had a chance to look at the chat. And it's, as you said, it might be as simple as documenting, because there's something very interesting happens when you start mapping out processes and you can visualize it and you can see it. And very often you can actually find some of the inefficiencies in what you're doing. I remember once mapping out a home loan process for for one of the banks, and it was 160 touch points. It sounds crazy when you think about it, but that's every single touch point that happens
Every single
from the
step.
time someone applies. And, by mapping it out, you start bundling certain things together. And even with a small business, that's exactly what you can do as an organization. So I know I can see Anastasia's on the line, and Anastasia runs a very interesting business, Yolanda. She runs a printing business. So, Anastasia,
Nice.
have you ever mapped out your processes? I mean, come on, Womex ladies, I'm going to direct the questions to you as much as I am Yolanda. So, Anastasia, I'd love for you to unmute and tell us if you've ever taken the time to map out your daily processes to know what happens when you take one of those orders through your factory. Let's hear from you, Anastasia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I got all flustered, Jesse, when you said, how many touch points for a home loan? 100 and something?
160.
I think mine would be
Finally,
a million if I really have to sit down and jot it all down. So a couple of years ago, I actually started doing it on an A4 booklet. And I was starting to write down from the first quote when a client phones you to ask for a quote request and what it actually entails to get that specifications from a client in order to do the quote correctly. And back in the days, we used to write it out and the size, the material, everything to the T. And then it goes to the estimator, and the estimator has to now work out the quotation. From the estimator, it comes back to the salesperson or the backup person, and they type it out, take it to the customer, sit with the customer to explain, is this correct, what you were looking for, make sure the specifications is what the customer wanted, then come back and then put the order in, then do the proofs, then take it back to the client to sign it. So, I mean, just thinking of the whole process in a business card, for example. It's not just, oh, I want a business card full color, one side only or both sides on 150 gram. No, it's the logo, it's the PDF, it's everything, the colors that goes into just printing a business card. So eye-opening stuff. And yes, definitely have to get out my A4 book again and start writing. Like I said, I think mine would be 1,000 points before it actually gets to the client and the client is happy. And then the after sale. Were you happy with it? Did we meet your expectations? And. So, yeah, a lot to do, a lot to think about, Yolanda. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so
Okay,
much for
so
that, Anastasia. I see, Yolanda, sorry, please respond. And then I see we have a hand up from Sizwe. We're going to get to you. And then I see Nirasha's got a question in the chat. But let's get your response, Yolanda, to Anastasia, and then we'll take your question, Sizwe.
okay. So Anastasia, wow, that's a lovely process. So what I wanted to ask is, do you have your processes documented? And I know documented for a lot of SMMEs sounds like rocket science, but it's really not. I mean, a Word document will do, an Excel document will do, you know, as long as you have somewhere where you can visually see your actual processes or your day-to-day activities. So I wanted to know from you, Anastasia, so do you actually have your processes documented? And if not, is this something that you think you see yourself doing? And, how do you think that can also help your business? You spoke about 1 million processes, so I'm interested to know how that will work out.
So Yolanda, I'm coming back to what we've been learning with the WOMEX group and all our lecturers so far. I'm gonna put it this way. Yes, I have. I'm busy revising the whole process, taking it from 1 million to what 100 touch points. And also, I think somebody in the group was asking, I trust me, and I trust me with the order of the client. So to jot it down and just leave it and give that control over to one of my staff members is difficult. So the answer, yes, I am busy revising it because it's, like I said, it's been a lot of touch points before it gets to the client. And secondly, have it up. Haven't put it up in my office yet. It's still in the A4 booklet. To take that
Which is
into and
fine.
explain it through to my staff and how to do that processes when I'm not here.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Anastasia. And it ties into what Nirasha said in the chat as well. If I can just get that. Nirasha, you said something about, giving your trust when you document your processes. I can't find it now, but I know it ties into what Anastasia was saying as well. So Nirasha, I know you had a question. We're going to come back to you, but Sizwe, you had your hand up. So can you unmute and ask your question?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yolanda, I have a question which is a bit interesting. I find that a lot of times I tend to be, the issue in my process. So let's say now I've jotted down my process, right? But I see that, I want to move to a place where I can maybe move myself out of the equation, not necessarily by getting someone else in, but automating some of the repetitive stuff that I see throughout my processes, that, it's a small thing, but having to do it all over and over again just really takes up a lot of my time. And I saw you mention using, Visio, which is a tool I quite like, but I'm still trying to figure out exactly, for some things, are there, solutions I can use to be able to just get myself out of, just remove that human error element out of that process, which I find slows me down quite a bit.
Wow. Very interesting question, Caesar. So if I'm getting you correctly, you want to find out if there are ways you can remove the human error element
Yeah,
and
100%.
rather automate.
Yeah, so I've jotted down my process, and I see
Yes.
there's ways in which I can improve it by automating certain,
Yes.
so remove myself from that. How do I take that next step? Once I've gone from, once I've, documented that process.
Okay, so the next step, once you've documented your process, make sure that it's the actual standardized process before automating it, because once you automate the process, whether you're using, RPA, software such as UiPath, automation anyway, then you can't really go back from that. So I think, Sizwe, you really need to ensure or make sure that that is the actual process that you want to automate. A common mistake that I've found, in enterprises is that they just want to automate everything without necessarily doing, a sanity check on what needs to be automated or not. So it's not everything that needs to be automated. So the second step will be for you to ensure that that is the process that you want to automate. So basically make sure that you standardize that process. And then thirdly, develop logic. So what I mean by that, develop, create scenarios in which how you want the processes to be automated. So if it's maybe automating responses, for example, maybe people are sending emails and you want those responses to be automated. So create scenarios that you can jot down to ensure that this is the logic that I want automated. And when somebody sends an email, I want the response to be automated. So you create, those different scenarios concerning or rather relating to your process. And then lastly, the last step would then to actually automate. And how you do that is then utilize tools such as UiPath, Automation Anywhere, or you go to an expert to actually do that for you.
Thank you so much, Yolanda.
Unless you can do that yourself.
Thank you,
But
Yolanda.
in most cases, yeah, that's very, specialized and technical. But if you can do that yourself, then yeah. But mostly then you would need to then, get to a higher level, expertise advice.
Thank you, Yolanda. Sorry to interrupt. Sizwe, does it answer your question?
Brilliantly. I think also the recommendation of the tools does go a long way in assisting me further with that.
Thank you so much. So Nirasha, you have some very interesting questions on the chat. So I'd like you to unmute if you don't mind, and maybe you can ask two of them at the same time in your own words, if you don't mind, Nirasha.
So much. Thank you, Jayshree. Thank you, Yolanda. Really, really interesting. Yolanda, I think since I started my business, I've always looked at, how can I do it better? And because I used to be a one-man band, it was hard to put everything in place, all the great ideas. So the first thing is, how do you take customer feedback on board when redesigning your business process? And what is the most effective way to actually collect this feedback? Do you have like a magic pill that we could use, and that we could take this feedback from either employees, if we have employees, or customer, and obviously customers, to actually improve our processes better? And the second one is, what is your experience on some of the common processes that are not working really well for small businesses that you've come across that we could learn from?
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nirasha, for those questions. So I'll start by answering your last question. So the common inefficiencies or problems with SMMEs are that we are one-man shows, like you said. So we want to do everything ourselves, and we, tend to not want to get the necessary help. So that's what I would say. You want to do everything, and then oftentimes there isn't even a real process or procedure on how all these tasks will be performed on a day-to-day basis. So that's why you find there's a lot of swivel chairing, moving from here, moving to there, and you find that you aren't really as productive. So the best way to combat that or to mitigate that is to actually then work on that base operational plan where you've got KPIs, where you've got the actual activity, and then you've got the actual resource that needs to perform that. Some may ask, but what if you don't have, the resources or the money to pay for an additional resource? I think as long as you have it, visually documented somewhere, at least in your head, you'll then start thinking strategically, or operationally to say that this task needs to be performed by a certain person and in a certain way, even if you end up being the one to do that. And then your last, okay, and then the other set of questions, I'm just going to read, how often do you take customer and also employee feedback when you're redesigning a process? So as often as required. We normally take around a month to 3 months, depending, processes are very complex, a process can even take a day to document depending on what it is. But I should say maybe not more than, well, let me not say more than 3 months, but let me just use a baseline example. Let's remember that example that we used about that app, that business app that we're providing for a bank. So let's just say 3 months. And how often is as often as you can. So we normally meet weekly, or rather twice a week. And during those meetings, it's basically a elicitation of processes, weights, and interview, between yourself and the operator, or yourself and the person that's doing the work. Normally, we target the SMEs or the subject matter experts, because those are the ones that know what's going on in the department. So we would basically be asking them questions about what they do. And oftentimes, not just asking questions, but actually asking them to show us what they do. So that then makes it easier for us to map the process. Yeah, that's actually the easiest way. Watch them, take a video, time the process in some cases, So yeah, that's what I would say, Nirasha. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Yolanda. I see Nirasha says, yes, you have answered her question. So with that, I think we're coming to the end of the session, Yolanda. But, from my side, having worked with just so many businesses, and I know, and that's why Raksha was very specific with her questions around small businesses, because we all have worked with the bigger organizations, we've worked within big organizations, but we want to apply some of these processes and systems thinking to smaller businesses so they can benefit from applying some of these methodologies to get the most amount of efficiencies, because they actually do benefit more than even some of the bigger businesses, because they have fewer layers. They can make faster decisions, they can find those inefficiencies. And I'm really pleased that we have this conversation, because I'm hoping that this conversation opens up the eye of the small business to realize that these methodologies can be applied to any size of business. And once you start documenting, identifying things like your pain points, mapping out your processes, getting your KPIs done, it's applying these systems in your business that will actually help you grow your business a lot more as well. So, Yolanda, you've been an amazing technical expert today with Mentorship Monday. I'm going to hand over to you for your final comments, and then we'll close off the session as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Jayshree, and everybody that's on the call. So we can do it, no matter how small, no matter how big your business is, just always think, what is it that I actually do? What is your end goal? So once you've got your end goal in place, so then it makes it easier to actually break that down and visualize on the activities that need to be performed on a day-to-day basis to actually then, produce the desired effect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. And for those of you that are watching the recording, you can find out more about Yolanda and the work she does by following her on LinkedIn. We will be sharing this recording. Feel free to share it at no cost to any business that needs to help grow their business using some of these tools and methodologies. And thank you, Yolanda. Have a wonderful Monday, everyone, and we'll see you next week at Mentorship Monday. Bye.
Bye.